They praised your kindness while it was draining you. They called you loving while your spirit was carrying weight that never belonged to you. But the moment your energy stops absorbing everybody else's chaos, the whole pattern gets exposed. By the end of this message, you will understand why accommodating people are targeted so quickly and how to build an iron gate around your peace without losing your heart. For a long time, you may have thought your exhaustion was just part of being a caring person. You told yourself, this is what love looks like. This is what maturity looks like. This is what being a good friend, a good partner, a good family member, a good believer, a good human being must require. You thought the heaviness you carried after certain conversations was simply the cost of having a soft heart, but that is how the trap begins. Because there is a difference between empathy and chronic empathy. Empathy is the ability to feel with someone without losing yourself in the process. Chronic empathy is when your internal world has no filter, no gate, no protection, and other people's emotions start moving through you like they have a legal right to live there. It is when somebody else's panic becomes your panic. Their guilt becomes your guilt. Their disappointment becomes your emergency. Their chaos becomes your assignment. And the dangerous part is that society often rewards this early. You were probably praised for being understanding, praised for being patient, praised for being easy to talk to, praised for being the one who never made things harder, the one who could handle it, the one who listened, the one who forgave quickly, the one who stayed reachable, the one who made room. But what nobody told you was this. Some of that praise had very little to do with your character and a lot to do with your convenience. That line may sting, but it explains so much. Because many people do not celebrate softness in a pure way. They celebrate access. They celebrate people who could be emotionally leaned on without limits. They celebrate people who absorb tension so nobody else has to face themselves. They celebrate the person who takes the awkwardness out of the room, who smooths every rough edge, who says yes before even checking what the yes will cost. And if that becomes your identity, you start confusing self-erasure with goodness. This is why chronic empathy is such a powerful trap. It does not look evil when it first forms. It looks noble. It looks holy. It looks generous. It even feels spiritually mature for a while because you think you are carrying burdens out of love. But eventually your body starts telling the truth. You begin feeling tired after calls that were supposed to be casual. You begin dreading messages from people you care about. You feel responsible before anyone even asks. You hear a certain tone in somebody's voice, and your entire nervous system prepares to serve. You spend your quiet moments recovering from emotional residue that never should have entered you so deeply in the first place. That is not normal compassion. That is emotional overexposure. And a lot of sensitive people live like this for years because nobody ever taught them that kindness, without filtration, becomes self-abandonment. Nobody told them that an open heart still needs a gate. Nobody told them that being available to everyone is not the same thing as being loving. Nobody told them that some of the people pulling hardest on their empathy are not in true need of care. They are in search of access, relief, and emotional convenience. So let us get honest about what being an emotional sponge really is. It is not just caring deeply. It is absorbing without discernment. It is taking in moods you did not create, taking responsibility for tensions you did not cause, trying to solve discomfort that does not belong to you, feeling guilty for protecting your own peace, and carrying people internally long after they have gone back to their lives. That last one matters, because an emotional sponge does not only help in the moment, they keep helping in private, long after the conversation ends, long after the text is over, long after the person has finished unloading. The sponge keeps replaying, keeps processing, keeps making space, keeps wondering whether more should have been said, more should have been done, more comfort should have been given, more understanding should have been offered. That is a hidden drain. The person may leave lighter while you stay heavier. And if this has happened to you, there is a reason your spirit has been getting restless, a reason you have started feeling resistance where you once only felt obligation, a reason certain interactions now leave you irritated when they used to only leave you tired. It is because some part of you is waking up. Some part of you has begun realizing that your empathy has been working without covering. It has been standing at the front door wide open while everybody else's emotional weather blows straight through the house. No wonder your peace feels unstable. No wonder your clarity disappears around certain people. No wonder you have had moments where you are physically present, smiling, nodding, even saying the right things, while something deeper in you is whispering, This is costing me too much. That whisper is not selfishness. That whisper is truth. And this is where the chronic empathy trap gets even more revealing. It does not only damage the empathic person, it trains the people around them. When your pattern becomes over-accommodation, other people learn what kind of access they can expect from you. They learn that your compassion can be activated quickly. They learn that your discomfort rarely stops you. They learn that if they bring enough emotion, urgency, hurt, confusion, or need, your gate will open almost automatically. So you become emotionally predictable. You become the person others call when they want relief, not always when they want relationship. And there is a painful difference between those two things. Some people do not come near you because they honor your spirit. They come near you because your empathy has become useful. You are easy to offload onto, easy to recruit into their stress, easy to draw into circles of explanation, reassurance, crisis management, and emotional cleanup. This is why certain relationships can feel one-sided even when nobody says anything openly cruel. The imbalance is hidden inside the expectation. They expect your emotional labor. They expect your calming presence. They expect your understanding. They expect your flexibility. They expect you to absorb the pressure and still remain sweet. And the moment you stop doing that, they act confused, not because they never noticed your efforts, because they did. They built around them. This is also why so many sensitive people struggle to know when enough is enough. Chronic empathy blurs the line between compassion and obligation. It makes every request feel morally loaded. Every boundary feels severe. Every moment of withdrawal feels like a failure of love. So instead of asking, "Is this healthy?" you ask, "Am I being nice enough?" Instead of asking, "Is this mutual?" you ask, "Am I abandoning them?" Instead of asking, "What is this doing to my peace?" you ask, "How do I avoid disappointing them?" That inner script will wear you down, because it keeps measuring your goodness by how much of yourself you are willing to lose. But here's what most people never say plainly. You can be deeply empathetic and still be improperly accessed. You can be full of compassion and still be surrounded by people who know how to exploit accommodating energy. You can love people and still be used by their lack of self-regulation. And the body always knows before the mind wants to admit it. That heaviness you feel after certain calls, that dread before certain names, that subtle irritation after being asked for one small thing, that is data. That strange exhaustion after somebody tells you their drama for the third time without any intention of changing. That inner collapse after being the bigger person yet again. That is data. Your body is recording the cost of an open gate. And if you ignore that long enough, your empathy begins turning against you. It no longer serves connection. It starts feeding resentment, confusion, numbness, and quiet burnout. You still look kind on the outside, but inside you are fraying. Inside you are beginning to feel the anger that comes from giving more than truth ever asked of you. That anger is not always a sign that your heart is hardened. Sometimes it is the alarm that your soul is done being used as an emotional landing pad. And once that alarm starts ringing, you begin noticing something else. The people who benefit most from your over-accommodation are often not random. They are observant. They scout. This is where the second layer opens up, because predators in emotional dynamics are rarely looking for the loudest person in the room. They are looking for the most accommodating, not always in a dramatic, villainous way. Sometimes it is subtle, social, familiar, even polished, but the pattern is still real. People who are manipulative, emotionally entitled, or hungry for control know how to identify who will bend the easiest. They study responsiveness. They study guilt. They study hesitation. They study who can be pressured with disappointment, who can be softened with praise, who can be cornered with urgency, who hates being seen as difficult. That is why accommodating people get found so quickly. A predator does not need someone weak. They need someone accessible. And accessible people often look very strong from the outside. They handle a lot. They are dependable. They are emotionally intelligent. They are considerate. They can read a room. They know how to calm tension. They know how to put their own feelings on hold in order to care for the atmosphere. To healthy people, those qualities feel comforting. To unhealthy people, those qualities look like opportunity. So they start scouting for signs. Do you answer quickly, even when the request is inconvenient? Do you smile when you are uncomfortable? Do you explain your no until it starts sounding like a maybe? Do you keep helping after being drained? Do you rush to reassure people who have made you uneasy? Do you betray your own timing because somebody else has become emotional? Do you stay in conversations longer than peace requires because leaving would feel rude? These are not random behaviors to a manipulative person. These are indicators. They are reading your level of self-protection. Maybe they notice that you apologize before speaking directly. Maybe they notice that you laugh when something bothers you. Maybe they notice that you become extra gentle the moment someone gets wounded or offended. Maybe they notice that when a person brings enough stress, you stop checking whether the stress is even yours to carry. That is all scouting information. And once they gather enough of it, they know how to approach you. Some come in with need. They make themselves look fragile, so your compassion activates before your discernment does. Some come in with admiration. They praise your heart, your wisdom, your calm, your maturity. Because flattery lowers your filter. Some come in with urgency. They create a situation where everything suddenly feels time-sensitive because rushed people do not guard their gates well. Some come in with confusion. They act helpless, so you step into the role of emotional translator, problem solver, comforter, and stabilizer. And while you are busy helping, they are busy learning how far your accommodation goes. This is why certain people seem attached to you unusually fast. They are not always connecting to who you are. Sometimes they are reacting to what your energy offers them. Relief, attention, soothing, space, a place to unload without much resistance. A person who will hold the emotional overflow they refuse to process themselves. And if you have lived through this enough times, you know how unsettling it feels. Someone you barely know starts telling you things that feel too heavy, too soon. Someone keeps reaching for your emotional labor as if it were already included. Someone begins assuming your availability before trust has even been built. Someone keeps placing little weights on your spirit and calling it closeness. That is not closeness. That is premature access. And premature access is one of the earliest signs that someone is not relating to you with reverence. They are relating to you through appetite. What makes this more painful is that empathic people often interpret being chosen as being valued. They think, this person must trust me, this person feels safe with me, this person sees something solid in me, and maybe sometimes that is partly true. But being emotionally selected is not always the same as being genuinely honored. Some people choose you because your gate looks open. That sentence can change your life if you really hear it. Not everybody drawn to your warmth is safe for your warmth. Not everybody who opens up quickly is offering intimacy. Not everybody who says, I can talk to you about anything, has earned that level of access to you in return. And when you miss that, you start becoming the ground where unhealed, manipulative, entitled, or emotionally chaotic people come to empty themselves. Then you wonder why your spirit feels crowded, why your clarity feels cloudy, why your own voice gets hard to hear. It is because too many people have been entering without discernment. This is why the iron gate matters. Not because you need to become hard, because you need structure. A gate does not mean nobody can come in. It means entry is no longer automatic. It means kindness is no longer the same thing as instant access. It means your compassion is still alive, but it is no longer available without wisdom. It means the people in your life have to meet a different version of you now, one who can care without absorbing, listen without carrying, and love without surrendering their center. That shift is powerful. But it is also the moment when many people around you begin revealing themselves, because the first real no changes everything. The first real no tells you who respected your heart and who is feeding on your flexibility. The first real no shows you who can tolerate your self-respect and who only enjoyed your compliance. The first real no brings hidden expectations to the surface. And once that happens, a very uncomfortable question starts rising. Have you noticed people only call you selfish when you stop doing things for them? That is where we are going next. Because the backlash is often the proof. That question is uncomfortable because it exposes so much. Have you noticed people only call you selfish when you stop doing things for them? Not when you are exhausted. Not when you are carrying their stress. Not when you are answering late-night calls that leave you drained the next day. Not when you are rearranging your own peace to make space for their emotions. Not when you are swallowing frustration so the atmosphere stays easy for everybody else. No. The accusation usually shows up the moment you stop. The moment you say no. The moment you do not rush. The moment you do not rescue. The moment your empathy is no longer available on command. That is not random. That is backlash. And for many people, the backlash of the first real no is one of the most confusing stages of healing. Because you spent so long believing that kindness made relationships safer. You thought giving more would create harmony. You thought being accommodating would keep you connected. So when you finally set one honest boundary and the response is irritation, guilt, distance, coldness, disappointment, or moral criticism, it can shake you deeply. You start thinking, maybe I did it wrong. Maybe I was too sharp. Maybe I should have explained more. Maybe I should have waited. Maybe I should have softened it. Maybe I am becoming someone I never wanted to be. But what is often happening is much simpler. Your no is revealing what your yes had been covering. That is why the first no feels so powerful. It does not just interrupt behavior, it exposes expectation. Before the boundary, some people were not forced to show you how entitled they had become to your energy. Your constant accommodation kept that hidden. Your flexibility covered it. Your empathy absorbed it. Your speed in responding. Your habit of understanding. Your tendency to make room before even being asked twice. All of that created a smooth road. People got used to moving through you without much resistance. Then one day, the road is no longer open, and suddenly you see who had built a whole comfort system around your lack of limits. This is why the reaction can feel strangely out of proportion. You say one simple no, and the other person responds as if something major has been taken from them. A basic boundary gets treated like betrayal. A delayed reply gets treated like disrespect. A refusal to absorb more emotional weight gets interpreted as cruelty. That overreaction is information. Healthy people may be surprised by a change, but they do not usually need to punish it. They may need time to adjust, but they can still respect what is being said. They do not weaponize your self-respect the first time it inconveniences them. People who benefited from your overextension often do, and that is where many empaths get pulled back into the old cycle. They mistake backlash for proof that the boundary was wrong, but backlash is often proof that the boundary reached the exact place where somebody's access had been living. It touched a dependency. It interrupted a pattern. It challenged an unspoken arrangement, and now the person has to reveal how they handle not getting what they expected from you. Some reveal it through guilt. They sigh. They withdraw. They become dramatic. They say things like, "Wow, you've changed," or "I guess I just won't ask you for anything anymore," or "You used to care," or "I didn't know it was such a problem." Listen carefully to the energy of those statements. They are designed to make you return to the role, not to understand your limit. They are not always asking, "What do you need?" They are often signaling, "I do not like losing the version of you that was easier for me." Others reveal it through moral language. Suddenly your boundary is not just inconvenient, it is unkind, it is selfish, it is cold, it is prideful, it is unnecessary. It is not who you are. That one can cut especially deep, because accommodating people are often attached to being seen as generous, helpful, loving, steady, and safe. So when someone labels your no as selfish, they are not just challenging the moment, they are poking at your identity. And if you have spent years building your worth around being needed, that accusation can hit like a weapon. You may feel an almost instant urge to prove that you are still good. That urge is the old gate trying to reopen. Because the truth is, many people do not call you selfish because your boundary is actually selfish. They call you selfish because your boundary stops serving them. Those are not the same thing. And once you begin seeing that clearly, a lot of your past starts rearranging itself. You remember all the times you said yes because no felt morally dangerous. You remember how often you kept giving not from peace, but from fear of how you would be perceived if you stopped. You remember how often your kindness was mixed with anxiety, how often your help was tangled with guilt, how often your generosity came from trying to avoid tension, disappointment, judgment, or withdrawal. That is not the same thing as free love. That is pressured caretaking. It may still look beautiful from the outside, but inside it is expensive, and the body knows the difference. That is why your first no can feel both terrifying and relieving at the same time. Terrifying because it threatens an old identity. Relieving because something in you has been desperate for truth. Desperate for a line that does not bend just because somebody reacts badly to it. Desperate to find out who can stay connected to you when you are no longer functioning as their emotional cushion. The backlash helps answer that question. Now, this does not mean every negative reaction is manipulation. Some people genuinely need time to adjust when you change. Some relationships were built in unhealthy patterns on both sides, and the shift can feel abrupt. But even in those cases, the important thing is not whether people feel something. It is what they do with what they feel. Do they become curious? Do they listen? Do they take responsibility for their expectations? Do they show respect even if they are disappointed? Do they make room for the fact that you are a person, not a permanent emotional service? Or do they escalate? Do they shame? Do they pressure? Do they twist your clarity into a character flaw? Do they keep trying to make you feel guilty until you return to form? That difference tells you everything, because the first no is not just a boundary. It is a sorting mechanism. It reveals who knows how to meet a whole person and who was only comfortable with easy access. And that is painful, because some of the people revealed in that moment may not be strangers. They may be people you loved sincerely, people you have history with, people you once believed saw your heart clearly. But when your no arrives and their response becomes punitive, something inside you has to face a difficult truth. Maybe they loved your presence but not your limits. Maybe they loved your comfort but not your truth. Maybe they loved what your empathy provided, but not the reality that your empathy also needs protection. That realization can make you grieve. It can make you question the whole relationship. It can make you feel anger for all the years you gave. It can make you want to go back to the easier version of yourself just so the tension will stop. But that easier version was costing you too much. That matters, because healing is not only about learning to say no, it is about surviving the emotions that rise after the no without abandoning yourself to make them stop. That is where strength is built, not in the moment you set the boundary alone, but in the hours after, when the guilt starts speaking, when your mind tries to reopen the case, when you begin composing explanations nobody asked for, when you feel tempted to send the extra message, soften the wording, add another paragraph, or retreat into over-accommodation just to restore emotional familiarity. That inner moment is the real crossroads, because every time you hold your ground through that discomfort, you teach your nervous system something new. You teach it that tension is survivable. You teach it that someone else's disappointment does not automatically equal your wrongdoing. You teach it that being misunderstood for a season is sometimes the price of becoming clear. You teach it that your peace does not need universal permission in order to be valid. That is a holy lesson for many empaths, especially the ones who were taught early in life to keep everybody settled, the ones who learned to monitor tone before they could name their own needs, the ones who became experts at reading rooms, diffusing conflict, anticipating reactions, and staying 2 steps ahead of other people's emotional storms. Those people often do not experience boundaries as simple statements. They experience boundaries as risk of disapproval, risk of disconnection, risk of being called difficult, risk of losing belonging. So when they finally say no, their whole body can shake as if danger has entered the room. And in a way, an old kind of danger has. The danger of no longer being rewarded for self-abandonment. That is why this stage requires so much compassion. You are not just changing behavior, you are rewriting the emotional theology you have lived by. You are dismantling the belief that love must cost access to your center. You are dismantling the belief that being good means being absorbent. You are dismantling the belief that the most spiritual thing you can do is endure endless emotional intrusion with a smile. No. There comes a point where self-respect becomes obedience, a point where boundaries are not rebellion, not ego, not hardness, but alignment with truth, alignment with dignity, alignment with the reality that your mind, your body, your emotions, and your spirit were not designed to be open dumping grounds for whoever arrives with enough need. And this is where the reframe becomes essential, because if you keep seeing boundaries as rejection, you will never keep them long. If you keep seeing them as proof that you care less, you will sabotage them the moment someone reacts badly. If you keep seeing them as a threat to your image, you will constantly perform softness while privately bleeding. Boundaries have to become something else in your mind. They have to become self-respect, not an attack, not a punishment, not a wall built out of bitterness. Self-respect. That means a boundary is not you saying you are worthless. It is you saying, I also matter here. It is not you declaring war. It is you refusing silent surrender. It is not a sign that your heart is closed. It is a sign that your heart is finally being guarded with wisdom. A lot of people think self-respect is loud, harsh, defiant, but very often self-respect is quiet. It is simple. It does not over-argue. It does not beg to be understood. It does not keep presenting evidence for why your limits should count. It knows that your humanity is enough reason. Self-respect sounds like resting when you need rest without creating a whole courtroom around it. It sounds like letting a message wait until your spirit is settled. It sounds like declining a conversation you know will leave you fragmented. It sounds like saying, I can't carry this for you. It sounds like, I'm not available for that. It sounds like, I need to step back. It sounds like, no. And then letting that sentence remain a sentence. That is hard for people who are used to wrapping every boundary in comfort language. But once you begin practicing it, you notice something powerful. Self-respect stabilizes your energy. It pulls you back into your own body. It ends the frantic scrambling to manage everybody else's reactions before you have even checked your own peace. And from that place, boundaries stop feeling like emergency measures. They start feeling like structure. That is the shift. When boundaries are seen as self-respect, they're no longer occasional acts you perform only when you are already overwhelmed. They become a way of living, a standard, a gate, a quiet inner agreement that says, I will not keep sacrificing clarity to maintain access for people who refuse to govern themselves. This does not make you less compassionate. It makes your compassion cleaner. Now you can help without absorbing. You can listen without carrying. You can care without collapsing. You can stay present without becoming porous. You can be generous without offering yourself up for emotional consumption. That is maturity. And there is something deeply spiritual about it too, because self-respect is not vanity. It is stewardship. It is recognizing that what lives inside you has value and must be handled with reverence, including by you. It is refusing to keep handing your peace over just because someone arrives with urgency, sadness, confusion, or entitlement. It is believing that your inner world deserves order, not constant interruption. Once that lands in you, a different kind of confidence begins to form. Not loud confidence, anchored confidence. The kind that no longer needs every boundary to be approved. The kind that can survive being mislabeled. The kind that understands not every accusation deserves an answer. The kind that can let somebody be unhappy without turning that unhappiness into a personal emergency. And that is where your life begins to change, because self-respect creates a different tone in your relationships. It teaches people how they can and cannot approach you. It reveals who is capable of mutuality. It shows you where you have been unconsciously offering too much. It gives your empathy a spine. But none of that becomes fully practical until you have language for it. Because many people feel the truth of boundaries before they know how to say them. They sense the need for the gate but freeze when the moment comes. The old softness rushes back. The old explanations start forming. The old guilt rises up and crowds the mouth. That is why the next part matters so much. You do not just need the revelation. You need the script. You need words that hold when pressure shows up. Words that protect your peace without dragging you into a debate. Words that stop emotional trespassing before it turns into another hour of internal recovery. And once you have those words, the iron gate stops being an idea. It becomes a way you move. It becomes a way you move. And that is why the iron gate cannot stay a beautiful idea in your head. It has to become language. It has to become response. It has to become tone, timing, posture, silence, and follow-through. Because many sensitive people do not fail at boundaries because they lack insight. They fail because the moment pressure arrives, their mouth still serves the old version of them. The old accommodating self steps forward. The old apology reflex kicks in. The old need to soften everything takes over. The old fear of disappointing people begins negotiating before truth is even fully spoken. That is why you need scripts, not fake lines, not manipulative lines, not rehearsed coldness. Clean language. Language that protects your peace before chaos enters. Language that keeps you from over-explaining. Language that does not leave your gates swinging open because somebody showed up with intensity, need, or emotional urgency. That is the iron gate boundary script. The first script is for emotional dumping. You know the moment. Somebody starts pouring their chaos on you with no warning, no discernment, no concern for whether you actually have the capacity to hold it. They do not ask if it is a good time. They do not check whether this is mutual. They just hand you the emotional weight and expect your nervous system to become the container. The old you may have stayed there out of politeness. The iron gate says, I can hear that this is a lot, but I'm not able to hold this conversation right now. That sentence matters because it is compassionate without volunteering your nervous system for sacrifice. It acknowledges without absorbing. It recognizes without surrendering. And notice what it does not do. It does not give a 6-minute explanation. It does not apologize for having limits. It does not invite the other person to argue with your capacity. It simply names the truth. Sometimes you may say, I'm not in the space to carry this with you. Sometimes this sounds important, but I'm not the right place for it right now. Sometimes I need you to bring this to someone who has the capacity to help you properly. That last part is important. Not everything needs to end with you. That alone will free many empaths. Because somewhere along the way they started believing every expression of pain was a personal assignment. It is not. Compassion does not mean instant emotional adoption. The second script is for guilt-based request. This is when somebody does not just ask for your time, your labor, your attention, or your flexibility. They wrap the ask in pressure. They make it harder for you to say no without feeling like a bad person. They mention everything they are dealing with. They imply you are the only one who can help. They remind you what they have done for you. They make the request sound like a moral test of your heart. This is where many people collapse. Because the request is no longer just a request, it becomes a loaded atmosphere. The Iron Gate says, I understand this matters to you, but I'm not available for that. Or, I won't be able to do that. Or, that won't work for me. Simple, direct, whole. No extra paragraph about how terrible you feel. No speech trying to prove you still care. No emotional overcompensation. Because the second you begin over-explaining, guilt has found a crack in the gate. And listen carefully. A healthy person can hear disappointment without turning it into a weapon. An unhealthy person often needs your no to become negotiable. So when you say, I'm not available for that, and they answer with a deeper guilt push, that is not proof you should reopen the matter. It is proof the script landed exactly where the old access used to live. Stay with the sentence. The third script is for invasive questions. This one matters because not every boundary is about requests. Some are about access to your inner world. People ask how you are, where you stand, what you are doing, what you are feeling, who you are speaking to, why you have changed, why you are quieter, why you are not as available, why you seem different. And sometimes the questions are not coming from care. They are coming from appetite. They want data. They want reassurance. They want a map. They want to know whether your gate is really closing or whether there is still a softer way in. The Iron Gate says, I'm keeping that private, or I'm not discussing that, or I'm in a quieter season, or simply, I'm good. You do not owe a full report just because someone asks for one. That sentence will upset people who are used to reading your emotional weather in detail, but let them be upset. Privacy is not dishonesty. It is stewardship. There is a difference between secrecy and sacredness. Secrecy hides in fear. Sacredness protects what should not be handled casually. Your peace becomes sacred the moment you stop treating it like public property. The fourth script is for repeated pressure. This is when somebody asks, you answer, and then they keep pressing. They act confused. They come back from another angle. They ask again with a sweeter tone, then a sadder tone, then a sharper tone. They do not respect the first answer, so they keep working the atmosphere until your exhaustion creates an opening. This is where a lot of people get worn down, not because the first no was unclear, because they were trained to think persistence means they owe a better explanation. The Iron Gate says, I've already answered that, or my answer is still no, or I'm not going back and forth on this. There is enormous power in that phrase. My answer is still no. No anger, no drama, no debate, just closure, because repeated questioning is often not confusion. It is resistance to your limit, and once you learn to hear that, you stop rewarding pressure with more access. The fifth script is for emotional manipulation disguised as vulnerability. This one is subtle. Somebody gets wounded by your boundary and immediately tries to make their wound the center of the moment. Not in an honest way, but in a controlling way. They act crushed so you will comfort them back into control. They perform fragility so you will reopen the gate. They want your empathy to start serving their access again. The Iron Gate says, I hear that you're upset. And then stop. Maybe, I hear that this is hard for you. Maybe. I understand you have feelings about it, but here's the key. You do not attach reversal to that acknowledgement. You do not say, I hear that you're upset, so let me cancel my boundary. You do not say, I understand this is hard, so let me go back to abandoning myself. You do not let empathy become a crowbar used against your own clarity. This is a major shift for people with soft hearts, because many of them think witnessing someone's pain means fixing it. It does not. Sometimes the most respectful thing you can do is let a person feel what they feel without rescuing them back into your center. The sixth script is for conflict bait. Some people cannot get the access they want through guilt or sadness, so they try irritation. They provoke. They twist your words. They act offended. They say things designed to drag you into proving yourself. They want your nervous system activated, because activated people become easier to steer. The Iron Gate says, I'm not arguing about this. Or, you're free to feel that way. Or, I'm ending this conversation. These are high-level scripts. Mature scripts. Covered scripts. They refuse debate. And here's what makes the Iron Gate powerful. It is not just the sentence. It is the energy you say it from. No trembling explanation. No performance of toughness. No need to win. No secret hope that the other person will finally agree you were right. Just anchored truth. That is how the gate gets its iron. Not from aggression. From consistency. Because the real power of a boundary is not in saying it once beautifully. It is in not betraying it when the reaction comes. That is the part that changes your life. The first time you use these scripts, your body may rebel. You may shake after. You may feel guilty. You may feel exposed. You may hear old voices telling you that you sounded cold, selfish, distant, unlike yourself. But that is not always conviction. Sometimes that is withdrawal from over-accommodation. Stay with the discomfort long enough to see what it really is. Because once you stop speaking from fear, you begin noticing how quickly people reveal themselves around clean language. Some adjust. Some respect it. Some even seem relieved that you finally became more honest. And some do exactly what the old pattern predicted. They test, push, label, withdraw, escalate, perform hurt, try to pull you back into being emotionally absorbent again. That is not failure, that is exposure. And once the gate is in place, there is one more thing you must protect. Because boundaries are not only about speech, they are also about atmosphere. You have to guard your new frequency. This is where many people stumble. They set the boundary, but then they keep reopening the field through overthinking, oversharing, overchecking, overexplaining, or overexposure to the same draining environments. They change the words, but not the access pattern. Guarding your new frequency means you stop living as though every person deserves your raw, immediate, unfiltered energy. It means you become more intentional with who gets the real-time version of you. It means not every feeling gets announced. Not every conflict gets processed out loud. Not every relationship gets direct access to your healing. Not every curious person gets insight into what God is doing in your spirit. Some things grow better in quiet. That is one of the most powerful lessons an empath can learn. You do not have to keep broadcasting your becoming. When your frequency begins changing, certain people will notice before you say a word. They will sense that you are less absorbent now, less explainable, less eager to jump into emotional labor, less available for random chaos, less likely to confuse being needed with being loved, and that shift will invite response. Some people will move closer in a healthier way. Some will fall away. Some will attempt one last round of access testing. Guard your frequency there. Do not make every test a discussion. Do not announce every new standard to people who only want to study it. Do not keep handing language to those who have only ever used language to work around your peace. Sometimes your boundary becomes strongest when it is no longer a speech. It is just your life now. A slower reply, a shorter answer, a private decision, a call not returned immediately, a conversation declined, a room left earlier, a question not answered, a burden handed back. That is frequency protection. So is paying attention to your body after contact. Notice who leaves you clear. Notice who leaves you foggy. Notice who makes you feel like you can remain whole. Notice who makes you feel as though your presence is being harvested. Notice where your nervous system softens and where it braces. Your body is not a nuisance in this process. It is an instrument. It will tell you when something sounds loving but feels invasive. It will tell you when you are around someone who feeds on accommodation. It will tell you when your old role is trying to reactivate. Listen to it, and guard your frequency spiritually too. Return to stillness. Return to prayer. Return to the places where your mind becomes your own again. Return to silence that is not empty but restorative. Let your spirit come out of performing goodness and back into living from truth. Because if you do not refill from a clean source, you will be tempted to reopen the old gates just to feel relational again. That matters more than people think. Many empaths are not addicted to helping. They are addicted to the feeling of relational necessity, to being the one people need, to being the soft landing place, to being the safe container, to being chosen through service. So when boundaries remove that old role, there can be a strange emptiness at first. Do not panic in that season. Empty is not always loss. Sometimes empty is clearance. Sometimes it is the first quiet your spirit has had in years. Let it teach you. Let it show you that peace does not have to be earned by overfunctioning. Let it show you that love does not require self-abandonment. Let it show you that your worth survives even when you are not carrying everybody. Let it show you that being less accessible does not make you less anointed, less compassionate, less useful, or less good. It may actually make your love more truthful. Because now when you give, you choose. When you listen, you discern. When you help, you do it from overflow, not compulsion. When you show up, you are not disappearing from yourself to do it. That is a different frequency, a cleaner one, a steadier one, a more expensive one in the best sense. People cannot casually reach for it anymore. And that is the whole point. You were never meant to be an emotional sponge for every atmosphere that passed through. You were never meant to live so open that other people's chaos became your identity. You were never meant to spend your calling managing the feelings of those who refused to manage themselves. Your empathy is real. Your tenderness is real. Your heart is real. But none of that means your gates should stay open. The iron gate does not kill your softness. It protects it. It keeps your compassion from being turned into a corridor for exploitation. It keeps your kindness from becoming a free resource for entitled people. It keeps your mental clarity from being clouded by every passing storm. It keeps your spirit from confusing constant emotional labor with purpose. And once that lands in you, something settles. You stop feeling guilty for needing air. You stop apologizing for not carrying what was never yours. You stop mistaking access for intimacy. You stop calling yourself selfish every time you choose peace. You stop seeing your boundaries as evidence that you have changed for the worse. No, you changed for the wiser, and that wisdom will protect the next season of your life. Because the people who only loved your lack of boundaries will not always know how to love your wholeness. Let them wrestle with that. It is not your job to shrink back into usefulness so other people can keep avoiding themselves. Your job now is to stay clear, stay anchored, stay gentle but gated, stay open to what is clean and closed to what feeds on your softness without honoring it. That is not hardness. That is self-respect with structure. If this message has been putting language to something your spirit has felt for a long time, let that settle in you. You do not need to become less loving. You need to become less absorbent. You do not need to prove your heart by carrying every burden handed to you. You need to discern what is yours, what is not, and what should never have crossed your gate in the first place. So move forward with this. Let your no be whole. Let your kindness be covered. Let your peace become harder to access casually. Let your empathy answer to wisdom now, not guilt. And let the people around you learn that your heart is still soft, but the gate is no longer missing. If this spoke to your spirit, leave your testimony in the comments and pass this message to someone who needs their clarity back.